The blood had dried hours ago, dark stains painting the wooden floor of the stagecoach like some terrible work of art. And Tessa Carmichael sat with her rifle across her lap, listening to the desert silence broken only by the occasional groan of settling wood and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. She had been riding shotgun when the bandits struck just after dawn, their guns blazing before the driver could even reach for his weapon. Samuel had taken the first bullet, slumping forward in his seat before toppling to the dusty earth below. The passengers, a missionary couple heading to Santa Fe and a gambler who had boasted about his luck in Dodge City, never stood a chance. They had died quickly, at least. That was the only mercy in this entire God-forsaken situation. Tessa had managed to wound 2 of the attackers before they scattered, apparently deciding that whatever was in the strong box was not worth dying for. She had checked the box afterward, finding nothing but legal documents and a few $100s in paper money. Not enough to kill for, in her estimation. But then again, men had killed for far less in the New Mexico Territory in 1881. The stagecoach sat motionless now on the road between Las Vegas and Santa Fe, the horses long since cut loose by the fleeing bandits. Tessa had dragged the bodies of the passengers back inside the coach, unable to leave them exposed to the elements and the vultures. Samuel she had covered with her spare blanket, laying him respectfully beside the road with stones to mark the spot. She had known Samuel for 3 years, ever since she had started working for the Butterfield Overland Mail Company. He had been a good man, a father of 5, and he deserved better than to die on this empty stretch of road with nothing but sagebrush and red rock for company. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the stagecoach into an oven. Tessa had positioned herself in the driver's seat, seeking what little shade the canopy provided while keeping watch in all directions. She had fired 3 shots into the air at intervals, the universal signal for distress, but so far no help had come. The next scheduled stage was not due for 2 days, and she had no way of knowing if anyone had heard the gunfire from the attack or her signal shots. She was 24 years old, and she had spent the last 6 years making her own way in the world after her father's ranch had failed, and her mother had succumbed to fever. Riding shotgun paid better than most jobs available to women, and Tessa had proven herself a crack shot and steady under pressure. At least, she had been steady until today. Now, sitting alone with 3 corpses in the stagecoach behind her, she felt the edges of her composure beginning to fray. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon when she heard the hoofbeats. Tessa immediately raised her rifle, sighting down the barrel at the approaching rider. She had 4 rounds left, and she intended to make them count if this was another bandit come back to finish the job. The rider came into view slowly, a lone figure on a paint horse, and Tessa kept her rifle trained on him as he approached. He raised both hands when he was still 50 yards out, showing he meant no immediate harm, but Tessa did not lower her weapon. "That's close enough," she called out, her voice hoarse from hours without water. She had given the last of her canteen to the missionary's wife before the woman died, a final kindness that now seemed foolish. The rider stopped, keeping his hands visible. He was tall in the saddle, wearing a weather-beaten hat that shadowed his face. "I heard shots earlier," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the distance. "Came to see if someone needed help." "You're a bit late for that," Tessa said, not lowering the rifle, "unless you can raise the dead." There was a long pause. The rider seemed to be taking in the scene, the empty harness where the horses should have been, the bloodstains visible on the side of the coach, Tessa herself perched on the driver's seat with her rifle and her determination. "How many?" he asked quietly. "4 dead." "Just me left." Another pause. Then the rider slowly lowered his hands, moving them carefully to show he was no threat. "Name's Wade Orson. I've got water and supplies. If you will lower that rifle, I would like to help." Tessa studied him, her finger still on the trigger. She had learned long ago that trust could get you killed in this territory, but she also knew that pride could do the same. She was out of water, out of food, and out of time. If this Wade Orson meant her harm, he could simply wait for the sun and dehydration to do his work for him. "Keep your hands where I can see them," she said finally, lowering the rifle slightly but not setting it aside. "You can approach, but slowly." Wade nudged his horse forward at a walk, and as he drew closer, Tessa got a better look at him. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of river stones. He wore a pistol on his hip and had a rifle in a scabbard on his saddle, but he made no move toward either weapon. When he was close enough, he reached slowly for the canteen on his saddle horn. "May I?" he asked. Tessa nodded, and he tossed the canteen up to her in a gentle arc. She caught it one-handed, never taking her eyes off him, and took a long drink. The water was warm but tasted like salvation. "Thank you," she said, her voice already stronger. Wade dismounted, still moving slowly, and tied his horse to the side of the stagecoach. Up close, Tessa could see the trail dust on his clothes and the weariness in his face. He looked like a man who had been riding for days. "What happened here?" he asked, his eyes moving to the bloodstains. "Bandits. This morning, just after sunrise. They killed the driver and the passengers, made off with the horses. I think they expected the strongbox to have more in it than it did." Wade's jaw tightened. "How many bandits?" "6. I wounded 2 before they scattered." He looked up at her with something that might have been respect. "You held off 6 men. I had position and surprise. They were not expecting the shotgun guard to actually shoot back." Tessa took another drink from the canteen, then stoppered it and tossed it back down to him. "I fired signal shots every hour. Nobody came." "This stretch of road does not see much traffic," Wade said. He glanced at the sun, now painting the western sky in shades of orange and red. "It will be dark soon. You cannot stay here alone tonight." "I am not leaving them," Tessa said firmly, gesturing to the stagecoach. "The company sent me to guard this stage, and I will guard it until help arrives or until I can get it to Santa Fe myself." Wade looked at her for a long moment, and Tessa met his gaze steadily. She had meant every word. Samuel and the passengers deserved to be brought to town for proper burial, and she would not abandon her post, no matter how afraid she was. "Then I will stay until help comes," Wade said simply. The words hung in the air between them, a promise made by a stranger with no obligation to keep it. Tessa felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight knot of fear that had been growing there all day. "You do not have to do that," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know," Wade replied, "but I am going to anyway." They made camp as the sun set, Wade setting up a small fire a safe distance from the stagecoach while Tessa maintained her watch. He had jerky and hardtack in his saddlebags, and he shared it without hesitation. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Tessa finally allowed herself to climb down from the driver's seat, her legs stiff from sitting in one position for so long. "I will take first watch," Wade offered. "You need to rest." Tessa wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her now that the immediate danger seemed to have passed. "Wake me in 4 hours," she said. "We will split the night." He nodded, settling himself with his back against a large rock, his rifle across his knees. Tessa spread her bedroll near the fire and lay down, but sleep did not come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Samuel falling, saw the missionary's wife trying to shield her husband with her own body, saw the gambler's shocked expression as the bullet struck him. I should have done more, she said into the darkness, not really meaning to speak aloud. Wade's voice came back, quiet and steady. You did what you could. You are alive because you fought back. That matters. Does it? They are still dead. Yes, they are, but you are not. And because you are not, their families will know what happened. They will have bodies to bury and a story to tell. That is more than a lot of folks get out here. Tessa turned on her side, looking at Wade's silhouette against the stars. You sound like you have experience with this kind of thing. More than I would like, Wade admitted. I lost my brother to bandits 3 years ago. We were bringing cattle up from Texas and they hit us just outside of Las Vegas. By the time it was over, my brother and 2 of our hands were dead. The bandits got away with half the herd. I am sorry. So am I. But I learned something that day. You cannot change what has happened, no matter how much you wish you could. All you can do is keep moving forward and try to make sure it means something. Tessa closed her eyes again, letting his words wash over her. Despite everything, she found a small measure of comfort in them. When sleep finally came, it was deeper than she expected, and she did not dream. She woke to the smell of coffee and the pale light of dawn. Wade was tending the fire, a small pot balanced on rocks over the flames. He looked up as she stirred. I let you sleep, he said. You needed it more than I did. Tessa sat up, running a hand through her tangled hair. She should have been angry that he had not woken her for her watch, but instead she felt only gratitude. Thank you. They drank the coffee in companionable silence as the sun rose, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. In the growing light, the stagecoach looked even more forlorn, a monument to violence in the middle of nowhere. We need to make a decision, Wade said finally. We can wait here for the next stage, which might be 2 days or more, or we can try to flag down a passing rider and send word to Santa Fe to send help. How far are we from Santa Fe? Tessa asked. Maybe 20 miles, half a day's ride on a good horse. Tessa considered their options. 2 days sitting here with 3 corpses in the heat, hoping that help would come, or one of them riding for town while the other stayed behind, vulnerable and alone. I will not leave them, she said again, and I will not ask you to stay here alone while I ride for help. Wade nodded as if he had expected this answer. Then we wait together, but we should move the coach off the main road, find some shade and a defensible position. If those bandits come back, I want to have the advantage. It took them most of the morning to maneuver the stagecoach off the road and into a small canyon about a 1/4 mile away. Wade rigged a harness using rope from his saddle pack, and his paint horse proved strong enough to pull the coach short distances. The canyon offered shade from a rock overhang and had only one entrance, which they could easily defend. As they worked, Tessa found herself studying Wade when she thought he was not looking. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, and he handled the difficult task of moving the death coach with a quiet respect that she appreciated. He did not make jokes to lighten the mood, did not try to minimize what had happened. He simply worked alongside her, steady and reliable. By midday, they had the stagecoach positioned and had set up a better camp. Wade rode out briefly and returned with a jackrabbit he had shot, which he cleaned and cooked over the fire for their lunch. As they ate, he asked her about her work with the stage line. How did you end up riding shotgun? He asked. It is not exactly common work for a woman. Neither is ranching, but I did that too before the drought took our herd, Tessa said. My father taught me to shoot when I was 12. Said every person on a ranch needed to be able to defend it. After he died and I sold what was left of the land, I needed work. The stage line was hiring and I could shoot better than most of the men who applied. That much is clear, Wade said, a hint of admiration in his voice. 6 against 1, and you are the one still standing. Barely, Tessa said, but she felt a small spark of pride despite herself. What about you? What brings you to this part of the territory? Wade's expression grew more guarded. I am looking for the men who killed my brother. I have been tracking them for 3 years now. The trail led me up from Texas, through Dodge City, and now here. 3 years is a long time to chase ghosts. They are not ghosts. They are flesh and blood, and they are still out there, still robbing and killing. Wade poked at the fire with a stick, his jaw set. I made a promise to my brother's widow that I would find them. I intend to keep it. Tessa heard the steel in his voice and recognized it. She had heard the same tone in her own voice when she talked about defending the Stagecoach. It was the sound of a promise that could not be broken. Did you catch any of them? She asked. 2. They are in prison in Texas. 4 more are still out there. Wade looked up at her and his eyes were hard. Can you describe the men who attacked you? Tessa felt her stomach drop as she realized what he was asking. You think the bandits who hit us might be the same ones? This is their territory. They have been working this route for years, hitting stages and travelers. If it was them, I need to know. Tessa closed her eyes, calling up the memory of the attack. It happened fast, but I remember one of them had a scar across his cheek here. She traced a line down her left cheek. Another was heavy-set, riding a gray horse with white stockings. The one who seemed to be in charge was thin, wore a black hat with a silver band. Wade's entire body had gone tense. The one with the scar, was it on his left cheek or his right? Left. God above, Wade breathed. That is Jack Dawson. The leader with the black hat, that would be his brother Clem. You wounded 2 of them. I think I hit the heavy-set man in the shoulder and one of the others in the leg. Wade stood abruptly, pacing to the edge of their camp. They are here. After 3 years, they are finally within reach. Tessa watched him, seeing the war of emotions on his face. Anger, hope, determination, and something that looked like fear. What are you going to do? He turned back to her, and she saw that he was struggling with the question. I do not know. If I leave to track them now, I leave you here alone. But if I wait, the trail will go cold again. It could be another 3 years before I get this close. Then go, Tessa said, though the words cost her more than she wanted to admit. In the day and night they had spent together, she had come to rely on Wade's presence, his steadiness. The thought of being alone again made her chest tight with anxiety. No, Wade said firmly. I told you I would stay until help comes, and I meant it. The Dawson brothers have waited 3 years. They can wait a few more days. Your brother's widow would understand. She is a good woman, and she would not want me to abandon someone in need, even for her sake. Wade came back to the fire and sat down across from Tessa. We wait together. When help comes and you are safe, then I will pick up the trail again. Tessa felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. You are a good man, Wade Orson. He met her eyes, and something passed between them in that moment, a connection that went beyond gratitude or circumstance. You are pretty remarkable yourself, Tessa Carmichael. They spent the afternoon in easier conversation, sharing stories of their lives and their travels. Wade told her about growing up on a ranch in southern Texas, about learning to rope and ride before he could barely walk, about his brother William, who had been his best friend as well as his sibling. Tessa told him about her mother's gentle nature and her father's stubborn pride, about the years of drought that had broken the ranch and broken her father's heart along with it. As the sun began to set again, Wade climbed up onto the rocks above their canyon to scout the surrounding area. When he came down, his expression was troubled. What is it? Tessa asked. Dust on the horizon to the south. Someone is coming this way. Tessa immediately reached for her rifle. How many? Hard to say. Could be a single rider, could be more. We should be ready either way. They spent the next hour preparing, positioning themselves on opposite sides of the canyon entrance with clear lines of sight. Wade had his rifle ready, and Tessa had her weapon loaded and primed. As the light faded, they heard the sound of horses approaching. "Hello, the canyon," a voice called out, and Tessa felt a surge of relief. It was not the bandits returning. "State your business," Wade called back. "We are from Santa Fe. The stage line sent us when their coach did not arrive on schedule. We have been searching the road." Wade and Tessa exchanged glances, and then Wade called out again. "Come forward slowly. Hands where we can see them." Two men on horseback emerged from the gathering darkness, both wearing deputy badges that glinted in the last of the daylight. They took in the scene quickly, professional and alert. "I am Deputy Marshal Carson, and this is Deputy Ellis," the older of the two men said. "We are looking for the Butterfield stage that left Las Vegas 3 days ago." "You found it," Tessa said, stepping into view. "Or what is left of it." "I am Tessa Carmichael, riding shotgun. We were attacked by bandits yesterday morning. The driver and 3 passengers were killed." The marshal's face grew grim. "How many attackers?" "6 men. I wounded 2 of them before they scattered." Wade stepped forward. "Marshal, I think I can help you identify them. I have been tracking a gang led by the Dawson brothers. Based on Miss Carmichael's description, I believe they are the ones responsible." The marshal's eyes sharpened with interest. "The Dawsons. We have been looking for them for months. They have hit 4 stages in the last year alone." What followed was a long discussion around the fire, with Wade providing detailed information about the Dawson gang and Tessa describing the attack. Deputy Ellis examined the stagecoach and the bodies, treating them with the respect they deserved. As the night deepened, a plan began to take shape. "We have a wagon following behind us," Marshal Carson said. "We will take the bodies back to Santa Fe for proper burial and notify their families. Miss Carmichael, you will need to come back with us to make a formal statement." "I will come too," Wade said. "If you are going after the Dawsons, I want to be there." The marshal studied him for a long moment. "This is official business, Mr. Orson, not a personal vendetta." "It can be both," Wade said quietly. "I know these men better than anyone. I know how they think, how they operate. You need me." After some consideration, the marshal nodded. "All right, but you follow my orders, understood? This is a lawful operation, understood?" They spent the night in the canyon, taking turns on watch. When it was Tessa's turn, Wade came to sit beside her before trying to sleep. "This is not how I expected things to go," he said. "What do you mean?" "I thought I would be tracking the Dawsons alone, like I have been for 3 years. Instead, I have the law on my side and—" He paused, looking at her in the firelight. "And I met you." Tessa felt her heart beat a little faster. "I am glad you came when you did. I do not know what would have happened if you had not." "You would have managed," Wade said with certainty. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, Tessa Carmichael. You do not really know me. I know that you faced down 6 armed men and lived to tell about it. I know that you stayed with the bodies of your friends when you could have run. I know that you offered to let me go chase my revenge even though you were afraid to be alone." Wade reached out and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "I know enough." Tessa looked down at their joined hands, feeling the rightness of it. She had known this man for barely 2 days, but in that time he had proven himself in ways that mattered. He had stayed when he could have left. He had kept his word when it would have been easier to break it. He had seen her at her worst, exhausted and frightened and covered in the blood of the dead, and he had treated her with respect and kindness. "After this is over," Wade said softly, "after we catch the Dawsons and you have given your statement, I would like to see you again." "If you would like that too." Tessa met his eyes, seeing the hope and uncertainty there. "I would like that very much." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his face, and squeezed her hand gently before letting go. "Then that is what we will do. Now try to get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." The wagon arrived at dawn, and the grim work of loading the bodies began. Tessa helped Deputy Ellis prepare them for transport, wrapping them in blankets and treating them with as much dignity as possible. Samuel's body they retrieved from beside the road where she had laid him, and Tessa said a quiet prayer over him before they lifted him into the wagon. The journey back to Santa Fe took the better part of the day. Tessa rode Wade's horse with him, sitting in front of him in the saddle, and she found comfort in the solid warmth of him at her back. They talked quietly as they rode, conversations that ranged from the practical to the personal. "What will you do after this?" Wade asked at one point. "Will you go back to riding shotgun?" Tessa had been thinking about that question herself. "I do not know. After what happened, I am not sure the stage line will want me back, and truthfully, I am not sure I want to go back either. What would you want to do if you could do anything?" It was a question no one had ever asked her before. Tessa thought about it as the horse picked its way along the road. "I always wanted to have my own place again. Nothing as big as my father's ranch, but a piece of land I could call mine. Maybe run some horses, have a garden. Something simple and peaceful." "That sounds nice," Wade said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I have been moving around so much these last 3 years, I almost forgot what it is like to stay in one place, to have a home. What will you do after you catch the Dawsons?" "I do not know," he admitted. "I have spent so long focused on tracking them, I have not thought much beyond it. I suppose I will figure it out when the time comes." They rode in silence for a while, and Tessa found herself wondering if their paths might somehow stay intertwined after this was over. It seemed too much to hope for, this connection with a man she had only just met, but she could not help the way her heart lifted at the thought of it. Santa Fe came into view in the late afternoon, its adobe buildings glowing golden in the sun. The town was bustling with activity, miners and ranchers and merchants all going about their business. Marshal Carson led them directly to the sheriff's office, where the bodies were transferred to the undertaker, and Tessa was taken inside to give her statement. The sheriff, a weathered man named Thomas Burke, listened intently as Tessa recounted the attack. Wade added his information about the Dawson gang, and Sheriff Burke's expression grew darker with each detail. "We have been after these men for a long time," Burke said when they finished. "If what you are saying is true and they are holed up somewhere in this area, we have a chance to finally bring them in." "I can track them," Wade said. "I have been doing it for 3 years. Give me a day to scout and I will find their camp. And if you do find them—" "There are 6 of them, Mr. Orson. You cannot take them alone." "I do not intend to, but I can find them and report back. Then you can organize a proper posse." Sheriff Burke considered this, then nodded. "All right, but I want you back here within 2 days. If you are not back by then, I am sending men after you." Wade agreed, and the meeting broke up. As they stepped out onto the street, Tessa caught his arm. "When are you leaving?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "First light tomorrow. I need to resupply and get some rest, but then I need to move before the trail goes cold." Tessa nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Will you be careful?" "I promise," Wade said. He glanced around at the busy street, then said, "The stage line has arranged a room for you at the hotel. Let me walk you there." They made their way through the streets of Santa Fe, and Tessa found herself acutely aware of Wade's presence beside her. When they reached the hotel, a modest establishment called the San Miguel, Wade paused at the door. "I will come see you before I leave tomorrow," he said, "and when I get back." "You better," Tessa said, trying for lightness but hearing the worry in her own voice. Wade reached out and touched her cheek, a gentle gesture that made her breath catch. "I will be back, Tessa, I promise." "We have plans to make, remember?" She covered his hand with hers. "I remember. Please do not make me a liar for believing you." "Never," he said, and then he leaned in and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When he pulled back, Tessa felt like the world had shifted somehow, realigning itself around this moment. "Be safe," she whispered. "I will. You too." She watched him walk away until he disappeared around a corner, then went inside to the room the stage line had arranged. It was simple but clean, with a bed that felt impossibly soft after nights on the hard ground. But despite her exhaustion, Tessa found it hard to sleep. She kept thinking about Wade riding out into danger, about the promise they had made to see each other again, about the kiss that still seemed to burn on her lips. True to his word, Wade came to the hotel at dawn. Tessa had been awake for hours, and she met him in the lobby with her heart in her throat. "I am heading out," he said. "I wanted to say goodbye properly." "How long do you think you will be gone?" "A day to scout, maybe 2. I will be careful, Tessa." "I have too much to live for now to take foolish risks." She smiled despite her worry. "Good, because I've gotten rather attached to you, Wade Orson." He pulled her into an embrace, holding her close for a long moment. "When I get back, we are going to have a proper meal together. Not trail rations, not jerky and hardtack, a real meal with all the trimmings. I will hold you to that." He kissed her again, longer this time, as if trying to memorize the feel of her. Then he stepped back, settling his hat on his head. "I will be back before you know it." Tessa watched from the hotel window as he rode out of town, her hands pressed against the glass. She felt foolish for caring so much about a man she had known for such a short time, but there was no denying the ache in her chest as he disappeared from view. The next 2 days passed with agonizing slowness. Tessa met with representatives from the stage line, who assured her that she was not being held responsible for the attack and that her position was secure if she wanted to return to it. She attended the funeral for Samuel and the 3 passengers, standing with the small crowd of mourners and saying her own silent goodbyes. She sent telegrams to the families of the deceased, heartbreaking messages that she crafted with care, knowing they would bring both closure and fresh grief. And she waited. On the afternoon of the second day, Wade rode back into Santa Fe with information that electrified the sheriff's office. He had found the Dawson gang's camp in a box canyon about 15 miles northeast of town. They were wounded, as Tessa had suspected, but still dangerous and well armed. Sheriff Burke immediately began organizing a posse. Within hours, a group of 8 men, including Wade and Marshal Carson, were riding out of Santa Fe. Tessa wanted to go with them, but the sheriff was firm in his refusal. "This is going to be dangerous work, Miss Carmichael," he said. "These men are killers, and they will not be taken easily. I cannot in good conscience let you ride into that kind of situation." Tessa wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. This was not her fight, not really. Her part in this story had ended when she survived the attack and identified the bandits. The rest belonged to Wade and his 3-year quest for justice. But that did not make the waiting any easier. The posse rode out at sunset, and Tessa spent another sleepless night in her hotel room, praying for Wade's safe return. She had lost so much already in her young life. Her parents, her home, her sense of security. She could not bear the thought of losing Wade too, not when they had only just found each other. Dawn broke clear and bright, and still there was no word. Tessa paced the lobby of the hotel, unable to sit still, until the desk clerk gently suggested she might be more comfortable waiting in the square where she could see the road. She took his advice, positioning herself on a bench with a clear view of the northern road. The sun climbed higher. Merchants opened their shops. Children played in the street. Life went on, oblivious to Tessa's anxiety. And then, finally, she saw them. A group of riders coming down the road, and even from a distance she could see they had prisoners with them. Tessa's heart leaped into her throat as she scanned the riders, looking for Wade there. He was riding near the front, dusty and tired but whole, alive. Tessa did not remember running, but suddenly she was in the middle of the street and Wade was dismounting, and then she was in his arms, holding him tight enough to bruise. "I am all right," he murmured into her hair. "I am all right, Tessa. Did you get them? All of them? All 6? 2 gave up without a fight. The others put up some resistance, but nobody on our side was seriously hurt. It is over." Tessa pulled back to look at him, seeing the exhaustion in his face but also something else. Relief. Closure. The lifting of a burden he had carried for 3 long years. "Your brother can rest now," she said softly. Wade nodded, his eyes bright with emotion. "Yes, and so can I." The prisoners were locked up in the Santa Fe jail to await trial. Wade spent the rest of the day giving statements and filling out reports. But that evening he finally came to collect Tessa for the meal he had promised. They went to a restaurant called La Posada, where the proprietor served them thick steaks and fresh vegetables and bread that was still warm from the oven. "I sent a telegram to my sister-in-law," Wade said as they ate. "Told her it was done. She sent one back that just said, 'Thank you. Come home.'" "Will you go home to Texas, I mean?" Wade was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "That is the question, is it not? I have been away for 3 years. I do not know if I still have a home there." "You have family there. Your sister-in-law, any other family?" "My parents are both gone. I have a few cousins scattered around, but no one close. My sister-in-law remarried last year. She has a new life now, and I am happy for her. But it means there is not really anything tying me to Texas anymore." He looked up at Tessa. "What about you? Where is home for you?" "I have been asking myself that question for 6 years," Tessa admitted. "After my father's ranch failed, I have just been moving from place to place. Working for the stage line meant I was always traveling, never settling. I do not know if I have a home anymore either." Wade reached across the table and took her hand. "Maybe we could find one together." Tessa's heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I have spent 3 years chasing revenge, and now that it is done, I find I do not want to go back to being alone. I am saying that in the short time I have known you, you have become important to me. I am saying that I would like to see where this could go, if you are willing to take a chance on a wandering cowboy who just figured out what he really wants." Tessa felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "And what is it you really want, you?" Wade said simply. "A life with you. A home with you. Whatever that looks like, wherever that is, I want to build it with you." "We have known each other less than a week," Tessa said, but she was smiling. "I know. And if you think that is too fast, I will wait. I will court you properly, take all the time you need. But I wanted you to know how I feel, what my intentions are. I am not looking for a brief thing, Tessa. I am looking for forever." Tessa felt like her chest might burst with the size of what she was feeling. This man who had stayed when he could have left, who had kept his promises even at great cost to himself, who looked at her like she was precious, was offering her everything she had secretly dreamed of. "I do not want to wait," she said. "I've been waiting my whole life for something real, something solid. I think I have been waiting for you, Wade." His smile was brilliant. "Is that a yes?" "That is a very definite yes." They left the restaurant walking hand in hand, and Wade led her through the streets of Santa Fe to a quiet plaza where a fountain sparkled in the moonlight. There, he kissed her properly, thoroughly, until Tessa felt dizzy with joy. "Marry me," Wade said when they finally came up for air. "I know it is fast. I know it is crazy, but marry me, Tessa. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that this was the best decision either of us ever made." "Yes," Tessa said, laughing through happy tears. "Yes, I will marry you." They were wed 3 days later in a small ceremony at the San Miguel Chapel, the oldest church in Santa Fe. Marshall Carson stood up as Wade's witness, and the stage line manager's wife agreed to stand up for Tessa. It was simple and quick, but to Tessa it was perfect. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, and Wade kissed her in front of God and their few witnesses, she felt like her life was finally beginning. The question of where to settle was resolved when Wade heard about land available near El Dorado, Kansas. The town was growing, the railroad was coming through, and there were opportunities for people willing to work hard. They used the money Wade had saved from his years of tracking the Dawsons, combined with Tessa's savings from her time with the stage line, to purchase 160 acres just outside of town. The land was raw and undeveloped, but it had good water and rich soil. Together, they built a house, starting with a simple 2-room cabin that they planned to expand as their needs grew. Wade proved to be a skilled carpenter, and Tessa discovered that she had a talent for planning and organizing the work. By the end of their first summer in El Dorado, they had a sturdy home, a barn for the horses Wade was beginning to trade, and a garden that Tessa tended with pride. Life was not always easy. There were droughts and storms, difficult neighbors and hard winters. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. Wade proved to be exactly the man Tessa had hoped he was: steady, loyal, hardworking, and deeply devoted to her. And Tessa proved to be Wade's perfect match: strong, capable, with a quiet strength that complemented his own. Their first child was born in the spring of 1883, a squalling, healthy boy they named William after Wade's brother. Tessa had been terrified during her pregnancy, remembering her own mother's death from fever. But Wade had been there every step of the way, holding her hand through the long labor and weeping with joy when their son was placed in his arms. "He is perfect," Wade said, looking down at the tiny red face. "You are perfect. God, Tessa, I love you so much." "I love you too," Tessa said, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. "We made a beautiful boy." William grew quickly, a sturdy child with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determination. He was barely walking when Tessa discovered she was pregnant again, and their daughter Sarah was born in the winter of 1884. 2 years later came another son, James, and then in 1888, twin girls they named Rose and Lily. Their house expanded with their family, growing from 2 rooms to 6, from a simple cabin to a proper ranch house. Wade's horse trading business flourished, and Tessa started raising chickens and selling eggs in town. Money was not always plentiful, but they had enough, and more importantly, they had each other. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Wade took Tessa back to Santa Fe. They stayed at the San Miguel Hotel, ate dinner at La Posada, and walked through the plaza where he had proposed. It was the first time they had been away from the children, and though Tessa missed them terribly, she also cherished this time alone with her husband. "Do you remember when I asked you what you would do if you could do anything?" Wade asked as they sat by the fountain in the moonlight. "I remember. I said I wanted a piece of land and a simple, peaceful life. And have I given you that?" Tessa looked at him, this man who had changed her entire world. "You have given me so much more than that. You have given me a home, a family, a purpose. You have given me love, Wade. Real, true, lasting love. That is worth more than all the land in Kansas." Wade pulled her close, kissing her temple. "I used to think my purpose was to avenge my brother, but I was wrong. My purpose was to find you, to build this life with you. Everything else was just the road that led me to where I was supposed to be." Do you ever regret it? Giving up your search, staying with me instead of tracking the Dawsons that first night? Never. Not once. You were worth staying for, Tessa. You will always be worth staying for. They returned to El Dorado and threw themselves back into the work of raising their family and building their ranch. The years passed quickly, marked by the milestones of their children's lives. William learned to ride before he was 5, showing a natural talent with horses that made his father proud. Sarah proved to be a talented seamstress, creating beautiful quilts and clothing that became sought after in town. James had a head for numbers and helped manage the ranch's finances from a young age. The twins were inseparable, always getting into mischief together, but with hearts of gold. In 1890, Kansas was struck by a severe drought. Tessa watched the skies anxiously, remembering the drought that had destroyed her father's ranch, but this time was different. This time she had Wade beside her, and together they found ways to make it work. They dug deeper wells. They conserved what water they had. They made sacrifices, but they survived. When the rains finally came in 1891, Tessa stood in the downpour with her face turned to the sky, feeling blessed beyond measure. Wade found her there, soaked to the skin and laughing, and he swept her into his arms and kissed her with all the passion of their early days together. "We made it," he said. "We made it through, Tessa." "We always do," she replied. "As long as we are together, we can weather anything." Their children grew and began to make lives of their own. William married a girl from town named Martha, and they settled on a piece of land adjacent to Wade and Tessa's ranch. Sarah fell in love with a young doctor who had come to El Dorado to set up a practice, and they married in a beautiful ceremony at the church in town. James decided to go to college in Lawrence, studying agriculture and business, with plans to return and help modernize the ranch. The twins, always the wild ones, talked of traveling west to California, though they were still too young for such adventures. Through it all, Wade and Tessa's love only deepened. They had built something real and lasting, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. Their ranch prospered, their children thrived, and their love story became something of a legend in El Dorado. The tale of the stage guard and the cowboy who had found each other in the aftermath of tragedy. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1901, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from all over, and there was music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. As the sun set and the party continued around them, Wade pulled Tessa away from the crowd, leading her to the porch of their house. 20 years, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they looked out over their land. 20 years ago, I heard gunshots in the desert and rode toward them instead of away. Best decision I ever made. 20 years ago, I was sitting alone with a stagecoach full of the dead, thinking I would never feel safe again, Tessa said, leaning back against him. And then you came along and gave me everything I did not even know I needed. I told you I would stay until help came, Wade said softly, and you are still here. Always, I will always stay, Tessa, until my last breath I am yours. She turned in his arms, looking up at the man she loved more with each passing year. There were lines on his face now, gray in his hair, but to her he was as handsome as the day they met. And I am yours, forever. They kissed as the sun set over their land, surrounded by the life they had built together. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, William and Martha's 3 boys running through the yard with the boundless energy of youth. It was a sound that filled Tessa's heart to bursting, a promise that their love would echo through generations. The years continued to roll by. Wade and Tessa grew older, but they never lost the connection they had forged in those desperate days in the desert. They worked side by side until their children gently insisted they slow down, and then they sat side by side on the porch, watching the world go by and counting their blessings. In 1910, Wade fell ill with pneumonia. Tessa nursed him through it with the same fierce determination she had shown that day on the stagecoach, and he recovered, though it took months for him to regain his full strength. The scare reminded them both that their time together, though blessed, was not infinite. "I am not ready to lose you," Tessa said one night as they lay in bed, Wade's hand clasped tightly in hers. "You are not going to lose me. I am too stubborn to die, and I have too much to live for." Wade brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "We have more years ahead of us yet, my love. Many more years." And he was right. They had another decade together, a decade of watching their grandchildren grow, of celebrating the marriages of the twins, of welcoming more great-grandchildren into their ever-expanding family. They took trips together, traveling to see the parts of the country they had never visited. They renewed their vows on their 30th anniversary, a joyful occasion that brought the whole family together. In the spring of 1921, Wade and Tessa celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch, now run primarily by William and his sons, for a celebration that lasted 3 days. There were telegrams from friends across the country, including one from Marshall Carson, who had retired and moved to California but still remembered the couple he had helped bring together. On the last day of the celebration, Wade stood up to make a speech. At 73, he was still strong and vital, his voice clear as he addressed the crowd of family and friends. 40 years ago, I was a man with nothing but revenge in his heart, he said. I had spent 3 years chasing the men who killed my brother, and I thought that was my purpose, my reason for living. But then I heard gunshots in the desert, and I rode toward them, and I found something far more important than revenge. I found love. I found my Tessa. He turned to her, his eyes bright with emotion. You have been my partner, my best friend, my love, my everything for 40 years. You have given me a family, a home, a reason to wake up grateful every single morning. If I could go back and change anything about my life, I would not. Because every road, every choice, every moment led me to you, and that makes it all worthwhile. Tessa stood and joined him, tears streaming down her face. I was alone and afraid, guarding a stagecoach of the dead, she said to the assembled crowd. And this man rode up out of nowhere and said, I will stay until help comes. He stayed then, and he has stayed every day since. He gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. He gave me love that has lasted through droughts and illnesses, through hard times and good times. He gave me everything. They kissed to thunderous applause, and the celebration continued long into the night. But later, when everyone had finally gone home or gone to bed, Wade and Tessa sat together on their porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Kansas sky. Do you remember that first night? Wade asked. When I stayed with you in the desert. I remember every moment of it, Tessa said. I was so frightened and so grateful that you were there. I knew even then that you were special. I did not know I was going to fall in love with you, but I knew you were different from anyone I had ever met. When did you know? When did you know you loved me? Wade thought for a moment. I think I knew when we were moving the stagecoach into the canyon. You were so determined to do right by those people, to protect them even though they were gone. You had this strength, this core of steel, and I remember thinking that I wanted to be the kind of man who was worthy of a woman like that. And then later, when I kissed you before leaving to track the Dawsons, I knew I did not want to ride out alone ever again. What about you? I knew when you came back, Tessa said. I had been so afraid that you would not, that something would happen to you. And when I saw you riding into Santa Fe, alive and whole, I knew that I could not imagine my life without you in it. That was when I knew." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and listening to the night sounds around them. Finally, Wade spoke again. "I am tired, Tessa. But it is a good tired, the tired of a life well lived, of work well done." "I know," she said softly. "I feel it too. When my time comes, I want you to know that I have no regrets. My only sorrow will be in leaving you." "Hush," Tessa said, squeezing his hand. "We are not talking about that tonight. Tonight, we celebrate 40 years of love and life together." "You are right," Wade said, pulling her close. "Tonight, we celebrate." They lived another 4 years, years filled with love and laughter and the joy of watching their family continue to grow. Wade passed away in his sleep in the summer of 1925, with Tessa beside him, holding his hand as she had held it through 44 years of marriage. He was 77 years old, and his last words were, "I love you, Tessa. I will wait for you." Tessa mourned him deeply, but she did not let the grief consume her. She had too much to live for, too many people depending on her. She stayed active, helping with the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, tending her garden and keeping Wade's memory alive through the stories she told. She lived another 8 years, surrounded by the family she and Wade had created together. In the spring of 1933, at the age of 76, Tessa passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her last conscious thought was of Wade and of the promise he had made to wait for her. The funeral was attended by over 200 people, a testament to the lives Wade and Tessa had lived and the impact they had made on their community. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren stood together, mourning the loss of the matriarch and patriarch who had built such an incredible legacy. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, under the wide Kansas sky they had loved so much. Their headstones were simple, bearing their names and the dates of their births and deaths. But beneath that, at the insistence of their children, was engraved a single line that told their entire story. He stayed. She loved. Together they built forever. The ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through the family and always carrying the memory of Wade and Tessa. Their story became a part of the family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The tale of how a lone stage guard and a wandering cowboy had found each other in the desert, how he had promised to stay until help came and then had stayed for a lifetime, how they had built a love that lasted through everything life could throw at them. In the town of El Dorado, Kansas, there is still a marker on the road leading out of town. It tells the story of Wade Orson and Tessa Carmichael, the couple who came to Kansas in 1881 and helped build the community into what it is today. It mentions Wade's work with horses, Tessa's community service, and the large family they raised. But what it does not mention, what cannot be captured in words on a brass plaque, is the depth of the love they shared, the commitment they made to each other in the aftermath of tragedy, and the beautiful life they built together. That love story lives on in the hearts of their descendants, in the land they tended, in the values they passed down. It is a story of courage and faith, of keeping promises and building something lasting. It is a story that began with a woman alone, guarding a stagecoach of the dead, and a cowboy who said, "I will stay until help comes." And stay he did, proving that sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with riding off into the sunset, but with choosing to remain, with planting roots and building a home, with loving someone so completely that forever does not seem like long enough. Their love story became legendary not because it was dramatic or filled with grand gestures, but because it was real and true and lasting. In a time and place where life was hard and uncertain, where death could come suddenly and without warning, Wade and Tessa had found each other and held on tight. They had built a life together that honored the memory of those who had died that day on the road to Santa Fe. A life that proved that even in the midst of tragedy, love could bloom and flourish. Years after their deaths, when their great-great-grandchildren would ask about them, the stories would always begin the same way. It started with a stagecoach attack in the desert of New Mexico, back in 1881. And those stories would tell of courage and love, of promises kept and lives well lived, of two souls who found each other when they needed it most and chose to build something beautiful together. They would tell of Wade Orson, who heard gunshots and rode toward them instead of away, and of Tessa Carmichael, who stood her ground in the face of death and lived to love another day. But most of all, the stories would tell of a love that transcended time and circumstance, a love that began in the aftermath of violence and grew into something gentle and enduring, a love that created a legacy of family and community that would last for generations. Because in the end, that is what mattered most. Not the tragedy that brought them together, but the choice they made to stay together. Not the harsh reality of the Wild West, but the tender reality of two hearts that found their home in each other. Wade had promised to stay until help came, but the truth was that help had come for both of them the moment they found each other. They had saved each other, in all the ways that mattered, and they had spent the rest of their lives grateful for that salvation. Their story, passed down through the generations, became a reminder that love can be found in the most unlikely places, that promises made in desperation can become foundations for a lifetime, and that sometimes the greatest adventure is not riding off alone into the unknown, but choosing to stay, to build, to love, and to create something lasting with another soul who sees you, truly sees you, and chooses to stay too. And so the legend of Wade and Tessa lived on, a testament to the power of love, the importance of keeping your word, and the beautiful life that can be built when two people choose each other, every single day, from the moment they meet until their last breath and beyond. In the end, it was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West but timeless in its message. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay, and sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a simple promise. I will stay until help comes, and end with a lifetime of kept promises and shared dreams, and a love that death itself cannot diminish.